The conflict between Israel and Iran has long been simmering beneath the surface of Middle Eastern geopolitics, with deep roots tracing back to 1979, when Iran's Islamic Revolution overthrew the Western-backed Shah. The new regime, under Ayatollah Khomeini, severed ties with Israel and declared it an illegitimate state, pledging support for Palestinian resistance. Over the decades, this ideological divide evolved into a shadow war, with Israel conducting covert assassinations of Iranian nuclear scientists, sabotage operations like the Stuxnet cyber attack, and intelligence raids inside Iran. Iran, in turn, empowered regional militias such as Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza, arming them and embedding deep proxy networks around Israel's borders. This uneasy balance began tilting toward open confrontation in April 2024, when Iran retaliated against Israeli assassinations by firing missiles into Israeli territory. That led to October 2024's Operation True Promise II, where Iran launched nearly 200 missiles toward Israel in a historic escalation, marking one of the first times Tehran attacked directly rather than through proxies. Israel responded just weeks later with Operation Days of Repentance, targeting dozens of missile bases and nuclear research sites in Iran, Syria, and Iraq, degrading Iran's air defense infrastructure. By mid-2025, regional tensions had boiled over into all-out war. On June 13, 2025, Israel launched a massive offensive dubbed Operation Rising Lion. Over 60 Israeli jets crossed airspace into Iranian territory, targeting over 100 locations tied to Iran's nuclear and military apparatus. These included uranium enrichment centrifuge facilities near Isfahan and Natanz, suspected underground bunkers, air defense radar systems, and IRGC Quds Force outposts. Israeli intelligence operatives and Mossad drone teams already embedded inside Iran disabled key launch sites and radar installations in the hours before the air raid. Iran's response was swift and devastating. It launched Operation True Promise III later that same day, unleashing over 150 ballistic missiles and more than 100 kamikaze drones at Israeli cities. While the vast majority were intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome, Arrow, and David's sling systems, debris fell in Tel Aviv and Beersheba, killing at least 22 civilians and injuring dozens more. One direct hit damaged Soroka Medical Center in southern Israel, escalating humanitarian concerns. This exchange marked the beginning of open war. Airstrikes, missile salvos, and drone attacks followed for days. On June 15th through 18th, the fighting escalated. Iran launched waves of Sejil missiles and Shahed drones. One drone bypassed Israeli defenses and struck a target in northern Israel. In retaliation, Israel bombarded missile production facilities and IRGC intelligence hubs in Tehran, Rasht, and Khuzestan. On June 19th, Iran's missile strike directly hit Soroka Hospital again, injuring over 50 people, including medical personnel and children. By June 21st, the 9th day of continuous fighting, Israel had struck key Iranian nuclear infrastructure in Isfahan, damaging Iran's centrifuge production network. These strikes, Israel claims, have delayed Iran's nuclear progress by at least 2 to 3 years. During these raids, Israeli forces also killed top IRGC Quds Force commanders Behnam Shahriari and Saeed Izadi, both key figures in Iran's strategic operations with Hezbollah and Hamas. Iran retaliated with a successful drone attack in northern Israel, causing structural damage but few casualties. The humanitarian toll is already staggering. At least 657 Iranians have been killed, including over 260 civilians and more than 2,000 wounded. On the Israeli side, 24 people have died and hundreds are injured. The Israel-Iran conflict has drawn clear lines across the global political landscape. Israel is firmly backed by the United States, which has supplied advanced missile defense systems, intelligence support, and bunker buster munitions, while reinforcing its commitment to Israel's right to self-defense. Major Western allies, including the UK, France, Germany, Canada, and Australia, have issued strong condemnations of Iran's attacks and expressed solidarity with Israel. Meanwhile, Russia and China have voiced support for Iran, calling Israeli strikes disproportionate and pushing for a diplomatic resolution. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, representing 57 Muslim-majority nations including Pakistan, has expressed unified backing for Iran's position. Regional powers like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt and Jordan have officially called for de-escalation, though some are quietly sharing intelligence with Israel to help neutralize Iranian missile threats. Turkey has positioned itself as a neutral mediator, engaging diplomatically with both sides while pushing for a ceasefire. The global impact of the conflict is already severe and growing. Oil markets have surged. Brent crude has jumped nearly 20% since June 10th, and analysts warn it could exceed $150 a barrel if fighting disrupts the Strait of Hormuz, threatening energy supplies to Asia and Europe. Rising fuel prices are already affecting aviation, shipping, and trucking industries, with jet fuel and diesel seeing sharp spikes. Inflation fears have returned to global markets, undermining central bank efforts to stabilize economies post-COVID. Shipping lanes through the Persian Gulf are becoming more volatile, delaying cargo and increasing insurance costs. Financial markets have turned jittery, with key indices dipping amid fears of a wider regional war. Humanitarian consequences are also mounting. Thousands have been displaced in Iran. Israeli cities are under constant missile threat, and travel advisories have been issued by several Western nations. With diplomacy stalling and regional militias like Hezbollah and the Houthis threatening to join the fray, the risk of a wider Middle Eastern war and its ripple effects around the globe remains dangerously high. The world is now on edge, watching closely. Military analysts believe that while Israel has degraded much of Iran's conventional and air defense capability, it cannot destroy deeply buried nuclear sites like Fordo without direct US help. If the US joins, the war could explode into a regional catastrophe, possibly drawing in Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and NATO. Alternatively, Iran may try to ride out the offensive and emerge with global sympathy, especially if civilian casualties mount. What happens next depends on decisions in Washington, Tehran, and Jerusalem over the coming days. A ceasefire is still possible, but so is a far more dangerous chapter in modern Middle Eastern history. While a full-scale World War III remains unlikely at this stage, the ongoing conflict between Israel and Iran has dramatically increased global tensions and exposed several potential pathways to a much larger war. The most dangerous scenario would involve direct military confrontation between the United States and Iran. If the US, which has so far limited itself to logistical and intelligence support for Israel, were to launch direct strikes on Iranian soil, especially targeting nuclear facilities like Fordow or Natanz, Iran would almost certainly retaliate with attacks on US military bases across the Middle East. This would force Washington to escalate further, possibly activating NATO defense protocols and drawing in European powers like the UK and France. At that point, we could see a regional war quickly spiral into something much larger. Another serious risk comes from the possibility that Iran might attempt to close the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow but critical choke point through which more than 20% of the world's oil supply flows. Iran has previously threatened to block it in response to Western aggression. If they act on that threat, the US Navy and its allies would likely launch a full military operation to reopen it. Such a move would not only draw in American forces, but also threaten global energy security, potentially dragging major oil-dependent economies like China and India into the diplomatic or even military equation. China, which has growing ties with Iran, could use the crisis to assert its presence in the region, while Russia, already engaged in proxy warfare and nuclear posturing in Ukraine, might align further with Tehran, complicating matters drastically. The involvement of regional militias like Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen also poses a major escalation threat. These groups, both heavily funded and trained by Iran, are already engaging in limited missile and drone strikes against Israeli and Western targets. If Hezbollah opens a full northern front from Lebanon, Israel may respond with a ground invasion, which could pull Syria, where Russia maintains a military presence, into direct conflict. A multi-front war could erupt, overwhelming Israel's defense systems and forcing broader Western intervention. At the same time, Iran could activate militias in Iraq and Syria to attack US bases, expanding the war zone dramatically. Finally, the most alarming wildcard would be a coordinated move by major powers, namely Russia and China, against the Western-led world order. While neither has shown signs of military intervention yet, both have condemned Israeli airstrikes and expressed support for Iran's position. If either country views the conflict as an opportunity to challenge US dominance, especially in combination with tensions in Taiwan or Ukraine, then the world could find itself facing multiple crises at once, triggering an unpredictable and potentially catastrophic global conflict.